Hi everyone, my name is Devdatta Supnekar. Currently, I'm working in Barclays as a senior data scientist (AVP). My areas of expertise lies in machine learning, deep learning, computer vision, generative AI, LLM, cloud deployment. And for this particular session, I will be covering how you can deploy machine learning model on cloud services using AWS. So I will be covering end to end, starting from building the machine learning project, and then how you can create a proper environment and deploying the particular machine learning model on cloud services. So hi everyone, in this session we will cover managing the Python environment. Now the purpose of using environment in Python project is because whenever we create a project, we need to make sure that the project is running properly in an isolated environment, so that when we transfer that project from one machine to another machine, it should run smoothly, because every project has different dependency. So that's why we need to make sure that the project is running in a proper environment. Now in this session, we will see what is environment in Python, how we can create an environment and transfer the environment, deleting the environment. So all the things related to environment, we will see that in this particular session. Okay. So now we will go deep dive and we will see practically how we can create an environment in Python. Okay. So first I will explain what is Python environment and how we can implement that. So let me give you one example. So let's say this is a computer or laptop, like where you are running your machine learning model. Now, let's say in this particular computer, if you install Python, so by default you have Python base version, and that base version can be anything. Like let's say you have installed Python 3.7, so your base version will be 3.7. So in short, base version is nothing but your default Python version. Okay, so this is your computer where you have installed your Python. Now let's say if I'm running one particular project in my computer, by default it will work in base environment. So let's say this is my project number 1. It can be anything related to machine learning, deep learning. So let's consider this is my project number 1. Now I'm running this project on my computer, and for this particular project, by default I'm using base environment. So as I said, base environment is nothing but our Python default version. So it can be anything 3.7, 3.8. For example, let's consider 3.11. Now, whenever we run a particular project, we need to install some dependencies for that particular project. So let's say for this particular project, I'm using some dependencies. For example, pandas, numpy, and then scikit-learn. Okay. Now all these dependencies has particular version. So for example, let's say in this particular project, I'm using Python pandas version 1.2. And then for this particular numpy version, let's consider 2.0.8. Now these are just an example, not the actual version. Now let's say for scikit-learn, I'm using version 1.0. Okay. Now let's say if I install all this version on my machine for this particular project 1, and if I run this project, it will work smoothly. We will not face any issue. Now let's consider I'm using one more project in same computer. Now again, it can be anything like machine learning project or deep learning project. So this is my project 2. Now again, for project 2 also I need to install some dependency. Now let's consider that we are using same kind of dependency for project 2. Now this project will also run smoothly because we are using same library version like pandas, numpy, scikit-learn. So we will not face any issue, and we are using Python version for every particular project we need to use a dedicated Python version. So let's say this particular project is again working on Python 3.1, which is base version, and project 2 is also working on Python 3.11 with this kind of libraries. Now let's create one more project. So this is my another project. Now in this version also I will install few particular libraries, but this time I will not use pandas 1.2. I will use pandas 1.8 maybe updated version. In NumPy, I will use 2.8 version, 2.8.9 something. Then in scikit-learn also, I will use some different version. Let's say let's say downgraded version 0.5. Now for this particular project, which is my project 3, I want to use a different Python version. For example, Python 3.10. Now the problem is the project 1 and project 2 will work properly, but project 3 will not work properly because project 3 require Python 3.10 version. And in our machine, we can see that we have only Python 3.11 version. So first thing is you need to change your Python version from 3.11 to 3.10. So you need to downgrade the Python version. That is first challenge. Second challenge is dependencies. So for this particular project 3, the dependencies, which is pandas, numpy, scikit-learn, is same. But if you see the version, these versions are totally different. So we need to make sure that we are using same version. Now, if you use Python base version for all the 3 projects, this 2 project will work properly, but project 3 will not work properly because it requires the different Python version. Now, let's say you change the Python version directly in the base environment. So let's say you uninstall your Python environment like Python and you install the Python 3.10 version. And in this case, your project 3 will run properly, but you need to install pandas, numpy, scikit-learn with this specific version. So if you change the entire default Python version from 3.11 to 3.10, your project 3 will work. But project 1 and project 2 will not work because it requires different Python version. And the libraries required for project 1 and project 2 is also same, but it is not compatible with 3.10. So this is the problem when you face, like you will face when you don't create a proper environment. Now, how to solve this problem? Hypothetically, if you see that, let's say you have one more laptop or machine. So let me copy this. So what you can do is, let's say you have another computer 2 and this is your computer 1. So you can do this thing, run project 1 and 2 in computer 1 with Python 3.11 version. So you don't need to work on this project 3 on your computer 1 because by default you are using 3.11 version. And then for this particular project in computer 2, you can do the same thing. Don't use this one, like, so don't run project 2 and project 1 in computer 2. Now what you can do is, in your computer 2 only install Python 3.10 version and install all this dependency and run the entire project. So basically you have 2 computer, and in both the computer the Python versions are totally different. Libraries which are installed is again totally different. So it can run smoothly, but this is not the ideal solution. So let's say if you work on 10 particular project, then you won't buy 10 computers and create 10 per project in different laptops. So this is not the practical solution. So that is why we need to create a proper virtual environment in our computer so that we can run multiple projects. Now we'll see how we can do that. Now let's say this is my again computer. Now, as I said, whenever you install Python, you will get one default base environment. So let's consider this is my Python base environment. And let's say I have installed Python 3.10 as my base environment. So this black box is my Python language with 3.10 support. Now let's say I want to work on project 1. So what I can do, I will create project 1, and before creating this particular project 1, I will create one proper environment. So let's consider this project 1 will be present inside a proper environment. So this is my Conda environment. Now we can create environment in Python using multiple options. Like we have Conda environment, which is very easy to use. So if you are beginner, you can start with Conda environment. Then there is one more options, virtual environment. You can use that as well. So in this particular session, we are going to use Conda environment because of its simplicity. So for every particular project, we are going to create a separate dedicated Conda environment, and we will try to run the entire project in that particular environment only. So let's say in my computer, I have created Conda environment, and when we create a Conda environment, there is a feature where we can pass the Python version. So let's say when I create this particular Conda environment, I can mention that which Python version I want to use for this particular project. So let's say this project 1 should work on Python 3.12 latest version. So you can just mention Python 3.12 while creating this environment, and it can create one particular virtual environment which is running on 3.12. Now inside this environment, you can create your project 1, and then you can install the libraries. So again, pandas, let's say 3.2 something. Let's copy this library only. So these are the libraries which I have installed in my this particular environment, Conda in env. You can name those environment based on your project name. So let's consider this is my project env, which is running on 3.12 Python version. And in this particular environment, I have installed these three libraries, pandas, numpy, scikit-learn with this particular version. Now, let's say if I'm working on another project, project 2. So again, first I will create a Conda environment and will give this environment a proper name. For example, env2. And this particular Conda environment will run on Python 3.8 version. So while creating environment, we will create we will mention the Python version. So for this particular project 2, I want to use older Python version, let's say 3.8. So the Conda environment will download the Python 3.8 packages for this environment, and then inside this particular environment, you can run your project 2, and you can install the same library with different version. So let's say pandas 1.8, numpy 8.5 something, and then 1.9. So now see, we have one particular computer. Inside that computer, we have installed Python version, which is our default Python version 3.10. And inside your Python environment, you have created two more environments. One is project env, which will run project 1, and another is env2, which will run project 2. In both the project, the libraries which I have installed is totally different. Like the versions are totally different. Pandas 1.2, pandas 1.8. Now, when you see these two libraries are totally different, but it will not conflict with each other. The reason is this particular project is running on dedicated proper environment, and this particular project is running on another environment. So this is the benefit of using Conda environment while working on project. It will not conflict with each other. You can run project 1 proper with 3.12 environment, 3.12 Python version, and same for project 2. So if you follow this kind of practices, no matter how many projects you have, you can run all the projects simultaneously in your machine. And for each and every project, you can create a different virtual environment or Conda environment. Now let's say you want to create one more project. Okay, now for this particular project 3, so this is my project 3. But for this project, I don't want to create any environment because this is just a test project or a scratch project. So what I can do, I can directly use this library only, and these libraries are present in my base environment. So for project 3, I don't need to create any environment because I want to run this project on my base environment. So directly you can write your code, create the project file .py file, and you can run those projects on your base environment. So it will use by default all the packages which are present in base version of Python, which is running on 3.10. But if you want a proper dedicated version, you can create that. So technically, you can use your base version for any of the project. You can create another version for new project, and you can install all the dependencies in that particular project. So this is the practice you need to follow while working on project. Now, at the beginner stage, most of the people do one mistake. They create environment, but they don't create environment for Jupyter Notebook. So this environment, whatever I have explained till now, is suitable only for .py files. So let's say you are running your project 1. So this will support only .py file. But you cannot run your Jupyter Notebook in this Conda environment. So for that, you need to create another Jupyter kernel. Okay. So let's say you have started your machine learning project in Jupyter Notebook, and that particular project will directly utilize Python base version 3.10. Then you started your new project in again Jupyter Notebook using deep learning technique, but again that project will also use 3.10 version by default. So for Jupyter Notebook also, you need to create a dedicated kernel so that it can run in that particular that proper isolated environment. So what you can do is, you have created this Conda environment. Inside the Conda environment only, you can create a proper dedicated kernel. Okay, so let's say this is the dedicated kernel I have created in this this Conda environment. Now same I will create in this Conda environment. So this is my kernel. Now this kernel is basically used to run the Jupyter Notebook code file. So if I have any IPYNB file, a notebook file, I can directly run those IPYNB file inside the kernel. Now this kernel, Jupyter Notebook kernel, will utilize the same Python environment 3.12 and same packages which we have installed inside this Conda environment. So you don't need to again install those packages in Jupyter Notebook kernel. So to simplify all this thing, all you have to do is, if you are working on new project which require some different libraries, always create one environment. You can create using Conda environment, or you can use any virtual environment library. Then if you want to start your project while writing a code in Jupyter Notebook, first create a kernel. Map your Jupyter Notebook to that kernel so that it will run the IPYNB file inside the kernel. And then if you are done with your IPYNB file and then you have, let's say, code written in .py file, then you can run that code inside this Conda environment. So for that, you don't require Jupyter Notebook kernel. Now, why I'm saying that you should create a kernel and Conda environment, it's because as per industry standard, let's say you build one particular project related to machine learning, and you have started project in Jupyter Notebook, but you will not able to deploy Jupyter Notebook on the cloud server. So whenever we create a project, we need to make sure that we have to follow proper project standard and structure. So ideally, you can start with Jupyter Notebook while writing all the processes like data reading, pre-processing, model building, inference pipeline, all the steps. And once you are done with that part, you need to create a .py file to execute that entire project. Because in production level, you will deploy your .py file, not Jupyter Notebook. So Jupyter Notebook is only useful while training and testing the project. But in deployment, you have to use .py file only. So that is why if you want to work on project, so as I said, step 1 will be, okay, just a second. So step 1 will be create a Conda environment. Okay. So this is my first step. While creating a Conda environment, I need to make sure that I should give a proper name to that Conda environment. So let's say this is my machine learning project. So I will give name like model deployment or anything. Okay, so this is my, so first step is create a Conda environment. And while creating a Conda environment, you can give a proper dedicated name to this environment like ML deployment. And then and while creating this Conda environment, you can mention the Python version. So in first case, if you don't know which Python version you should use, like 3.10, 3.11, 3.12. So if you don't know anything, you can start with any version. But I will suggest use Python 3.11 or 3.10, depending on which is the latest version. I will not recommend to use the old version like 3.7 and 3.8, because most of the libraries will be out of the uh, those are not will be the updated one. And if you use the latest Python version, let's say 3.12 or 3.13, and in future, let's say if the Python updated version is 3.15 or 16, so that version is very latest and there will be more bugs in that particular version. So don't use latest updated version and older version. So stick to one particular version. Okay, so in this particular case, let's say I'm using 3.11. Okay, so first create a Conda environment, give a proper name. While creating a Conda environment, you can mention the Python version 3.11 or whatever you want to use it. Once you create a Conda environment, create a Jupyter kernel as well. If you want to work with IPYNB, if you don't want to use IPYNB, no need to create a Jupyter notebook kernel. So inside the Conda environment only, you need to activate your environment and create a kernel. So this is my kernel, which will help me to run IPYNB notebook files inside my Conda environment. Okay, once you are done with the kernel part, then you can install Python dependencies. Okay, now let's again consider this dependencies like pandas. Whatever version you want to install, you can install that. Okay, so all the version like pandas, numpy, scikit-learn, tensorflow, and joblib, what all the required version you can install in this environment. So after this step 3, once you install all the version, then you can start writing your py.code file, and then you can run the entire project inside this particular environment. So this Conda environment is a virtual computer which will which will use the dependencies, and it cannot conflict with another project dependencies. That is the reason we need to use Conda environment for each and every project. Now, if you want to go one step ahead with this Conda environment, you can use Docker container. But the difference between this Conda environment and Docker container is, in Conda environment, we mostly map the dependencies which are related to Python. So we need to make sure that whatever required for this particular project related to Python, we only capture those things and use those things in the environment. But in Docker container, you also need to make sure that you are capturing the Windows version or any operating system. So you can consider as Docker is a virtual computer which takes snapshot of your operating system, all the dependencies beyond your Python version, and then it create a virtual computer where you can run your entire code. So mostly in production level, first we create a Conda environment and Docker container, and then we can deploy your Docker container to the cloud services, and then it can run smoothly. So if you follow this practice, creating a proper environment, maintaining a proper project structure, then you can deploy your project on cloud services, and you will not face any version issue in future because you have created a proper dedicated environment. So this is the basic intro of what is Conda environment, how to use, why to use, and now we'll see how to create a Conda environment using all the code files.